Well, hi there. Happy Monday. It's chilly here in Southern California. I know that sounds ridiculous to those of you who are back east and up north. California is on fire. There's nothing to laugh about. It's really serious. They're not that far from here. Uh, Tens of thousands of people have been evacuated, and lots of people are in the dark because of power shutdowns. So that always provides a distraction. However, we're doing okay here in Simi Valley, and that's a good thing. Uh, I talked about applied curiosity and agile learning, and it fascinates me. The whole idea of both of those subjects fascinate me. But the thought occurred to me that if there are agile learners, there probably is such a thing as agile education and agile educators, and providing the tools necessary to learn and grow. And I'm sure that this is being used at the City of Hope uh, in their research efforts, just because it's cutting edge and it smacks. When you start reading about it, it smacks of the kind of collaborative work they do there. And I don't know why, but perhaps because of the 50 plus years I've been involved in the automotive industry, I always look at things through the lens of the automotive aftermarket, the repair community, the lack of availability of adequate training and education. And there's a difference, and I think it's important to note the difference. And I'll do that as often and as early as I can in any of these subjects that we discussed. And education is all about why you do something. Though it's the why to. Training is all about the how to. Is the mechanics of actually doing whatever the work is. One's practical, one's theoretical, or more so than the other. When you start talking about agile learning, it's a term that comes out of the software industry, and it has a lot of implications for, I think, for better outcomes, for better results, if we pay attention to what that's all about. The problem is, it doesn't seem like anybody talks about these really great ideas in terms of today's world, the world we live in, and how to educate differently in the classroom. I'm not going to whine about the education that I received in school because, to a large degree, um, the benefit or lack of benefit that I received was, at my own hands. I was an active participant especially after moving to California from New York when I was 15 years old and being lost in what might as well have been a different universe, an alternate reality. Um, I wasn't the best student ever. Not that I was, not that I was an active participant in my own education, even back east. Although I did get much better grades because at least I understood what the game was all about. When I got here to California, I didn't, and I didn't care, and that made things difficult. So, in many instances, I was self-educated, and it seems to have worked out pretty well so far. So I'm not going to really whine and cry about that either. Uh, but there is really a lack of cutting edge information when it comes to education and training within the automotive environment. And I can only imagine that it goes beyond that. Certainly when it comes to a different way of educating young people, either in the trades or in other disciplines. This idea of agile education is all based around self-organizing teams. Uh, Difficult to have self-organizing teams in an industry like the automotive industry where compensation models are based on performance, individual performance, and in many cases haven't really made the transition to rewarding the group. So self-organization is a big part of this whole idea of agile education, um, as is visual accountability. In other words, posting how well individuals are doing when they work together towards common goals and objectives. And unfortunately, reflective feedback is another principle involved in agile education that doesn't get transferred well into the real world. Because if you have a performance-based compensation model and it's all about the individual, then the organization as a whole suffers in general, unless everybody has shared goals and objectives. And if you have shared goals and objectives, it actually makes more sense to work together as teams. Um, and the problem here is that all of those things that I just mentioned a moment ago, self-organization, um, visual accountability structures, reflective feedback, all require higher levels of consciousness and communication than really exist in many instances in or outside the automotive aftermarket, um, and in and out of public education today as a rule. Uh, the fact of the matter is that in order to be successful in any of this, whether you're an educated, whether you are educated or you are an educator, whether you're in education or you're in personal development or self-improvement, you've got to own your own learning. You know, you've got to be responsible for your own success. Nobody can rip the top of your head open and pour knowledge inside. So the whole idea becomes what models are going to work best for moving that information uh, from where it is to where you need it, and how you are going to best utilize whatever information is available to you at any given moment. I think one of the things that's really important when you start talking about these ideas of self-organization, you've got to be fairly high on Maslow's ladder now, right? We've talked about that before. Uh, if you're stuck on the first three rungs of that ladder, you're pretty well torched. You need to really be doing better than that. Um, you're going to talk about visual accountability, where your performance is stacked up against everybody else's performance, or the performance of the team is stacked up against other teams, or reflective feedback, accepting constructive suggestions, gentle correction from those around you, all require higher levels of consciousness. And the question is, how do we get there? You know, and how do we make that happen? How do we make it happen for our kids? Because um, one of the things that's pretty apparent to me as a former employer, as a trained observer, as a trade journalist, looking at the automotive industry, um, looking at education today, looking at our kids, particularly at our grandkids, there's really not a lot of effort and energy being put into making sure that the kids that come out of school are critical thinkers. There's a lot of effort being placed on whether or not they can pass a test, some kind of an arbitrary indication of material that's relevant or meaningful in the real world, and that's arguable, um, as opposed to whether or not they're going to become full functioning human beings in a workplace that's changing more quickly than anybody wants to admit. So I think I'm going to plant that seed. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it, plant that seed in the ground for this idea of agile education and agile educators. And if you have any information on it. I should be interested in it. I tried to look it up and see if it was being utilized anywhere in trade education, vocational education, and I couldn't find it. Um, Tried to try and find out whether it was being used in school districts around where we are. Was unsuccessful in finding it. So if you have any information that you can share with me, I'm really interested in finding out more about it. So you know where to find me. The easiest guy in the world to find. Until tomorrow, stay well, take care. Uh, we'll tell you that I had a great interview today with Dave Farrow, uh, Brains Behind It podcast for Brain Hackers, his company. And as soon as I know when that show will air, uh, either the podcast will air or the video will appear on YouTube, I'll let y'all know. Thank you and good night.